Miss Kim Knows and Other Stories is a collection of 8 short stories from Cho Nam-Joo, the Korean author who is best known for creating Kim JiYoung, born 1982, and this work is translated by Jamie Chang. Now, I have 2 opinions about short story collections. Firstly, there is something lacking from them that I very much enjoy in novels, and consequently, they're very rarely my thing, and there are very few authors that are talented at writing both novels and short story collections. That combined with Cho Nam-Joo's last novel, Saha, being pretty mediocre, and you might have expected me to be a little nervous going into this collection. But look at that cover. Expectations were high. So did it deliver? Each short story offers us a different woman, a different story, a different situation. Or were they all the same woman? One woman casually mentions breaking up with her boyfriend, a line that is of no relevance to the story, only for the next story to be about a woman breaking up with her boyfriend. This is one of several coincidences that link the characters together. In Miss Kim Knows, a famous author meets her influential high school teacher, Miss Kim. Miss Kim and the author share a meal, have a few drinks, and Miss Kim tells the author a story about her father hitting her as a child. For the author, this brings up memories of her own very similar past, and she begins to write a story about her own experiences. Later, Miss Kim calls her up and accuses her of stealing her story, separating her father into 2 characters, a father and a brother. And the author considers the commonality of these issues, how almost every woman has a similar story. In Kim JiYoung, born 1982, the name Kim JiYoung could have been translated as Jane Smith. It is a common name, a placeholder to represent all women, and picking Miss Kim, a name so similar to the title of her novel, one cannot help but to see the same thing within these stories. Miss Kim herself is not just in one story. We notice that she has moved from a teacher to an office worker in another story, and we start to wonder, is that the same Miss Kim? After all, the Miss Kim who was a teacher is still a teacher in her story. The way of representing the commonality of experiences of women is brilliant. Cho Nam-Joo is not saying that these are one-off experiences. She is saying that these are society-wide experiences, but she is also noting that all women are different at the same time, and she's doing this through the inconsistencies. No 2 women in these stories are the same, but all the women share something to one of the other women. Sometimes they are breaking up with a boyfriend, and sometimes they're just called Miss Kim. And the power of this as a reader is we're no longer reading a short story, but we're reading a collection. All the stories in the collection do stand alone, but they're adding up to something much more than the sum of their parts. Kim JiYoung was one woman representing all women, but Miss Kim is all women representing one. So right now you're probably thinking, Scott, I've already read Kim JiYoung. Why should I read the short story version of it? The similarities with Kim JiYoung cannot be ignored, but Cho Nam-Joo wrote that in 2016. She wrote Miss Kim in 2021. Society has changed, the issues that have been touched on have changed, and the author herself has changed. She has some new tricks. The famous author in Miss Kim Knows has written a feminist novel. When Miss Kim asks her to speak at an old school, she receives death threats from the students. Miss Kim casually mentions that she was surprised by how close in age both women were, letting us know that the author must be in her 40s by now. Cho Nam-Joo was 41 when she wrote Miss Kim. And of course, Cho Nam-Joo is famous for writing a feminist novel and has received death threats. Is she inserting herself in the novel? I must confess that my first impression was that she definitely was, and it was interesting to hear the character's internal dialogue about being an author, about dealing with these issues. But then when I realized that the Miss Kims in the different stories were clearly different people, and that there are all these coincidences and inaccuracies, did I miss something about the author? Was she really Cho Nam-Joo? For the record, Cho Nam-Joo lives in Seoul and attended all-girls schools up to and including university. Were these represented in the story? I couldn't remember. It was hazy. And so I'm left left wondering the question, where does art begin and the artist end? What about the question, is Cho Nam-Joo Miss Kim as well? Are all the characters in this book Cho Nam-Joo? This book is really meta, and to continue with that, generational change is a theme in several stories, with so much changing between 2016 and 2022, both in society and in the way in which feminism is considered. And therefore it's really interesting to see which themes Kim JiYoung and Miss Kim have in common, which themes are new to Miss Kim, and which themes have dropped out from Kim JiYoung. One of the absolute best short stories in this collection is about being filmed without consent. It is pretty clearly about upskirting. A teenage schoolgirl is considering her mother. She used to work in a shelter for battered women. Her father said to her mother, "Why do you take these women back if they just go back to their husband?" The mother replied, "They go back to their husband because they have no money. They have no other choice." The mother then left her job working in a woman's shelter to raise her child, and 15 years later she gets a phone call from another mum about the upskirting incident, claiming that the girls made it up, that it looked like one thing when it was really another, that they were just acting. Think of the consequences that would have for the boys. She is persuaded to talk to her daughter. The relationship between mother and daughter represents the relationship between older feminists and newer feminists, between old ideas and new ideas, the new issues and the issues that will always be. One might look at how trans women fit into the feminist movement, or revenge porn, or the increasing popularity of platforms such as OnlyFans for Western examples of newer and potentially very divisive issues within feminist circles. And so what is Cho Nam-Joo saying about this in her story? I think she's saying that the solution lies in dialogue and understanding, that the lived experience is more important than the theoretical understanding. One can see how the father not understanding why battered women return to their abusers can be mirrored in the way that some old feminists do not understand the nuances of the issues facing the next generation of women, and the constant need to listen and understand even if you think you know better, because there's usually much more to the issue than we think. This story also represents how society can force people to conform for their own benefits. Miss Kim and Other Stories has all the feminist themes one might expect from the author of Kim JiYoung, but it is fresh and with some new cool literary themes added to it. This is so much more complex than the style of Kim JiYoung, but it is still very readable. And I simply love having older women and teenagers centered in different stories. There is such a variety of point of view in this collection. The characters had the potential to bleed into each other with the themes that Cho Nam-Joo was playing with. But rather than preventing that, Cho Nam-Joo simply made sure that there were characters who stood out, the titular Miss Kim being one. And this was such a clever way to express the themes of this novel, and did not take away from the enjoyment of reading it at all. So did this book live up to expectations? I think it does. I think this means that Cho Nam-Joo is back, that she is a must-read South Korean author. And she showed me that an author can write a fantastic novel and a fantastic short story collection. You don't need to have read Kim JiYoung to enjoy the collection, although having read it before certainly helped me to enjoy it. I'd like to thank my wonderful Patreons. If you'd like to join us this month, we are reading Julia by Sandra Newman. It's a feminist retelling of 1984. Please like this video, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You know what to do. Bye bye.